Happy Monday, everybody. Hope you had a great weekend. I also hope you watched the conversation about racism, policing, Black Lives Matters, and other issues that I had with Stephen Splund. If you did not, please go to our YouTube page or our Facebook page. Links are on the church website, and watch that. It's a very meaningful conversation that I think will be a help to anyone, and watch it, and feel free to share it with others. Let's do all we can to help all of us learn and grow, and so share the word as best you can, and thank you for watching that. But today we are in the book of Romans again in our New Testament reading plan, chapter 14, for our daily reading and devotion. So I hope you've already read it and written in your journal as God spoke to your heart. I want to share with you some things that stood out to me as I read this chapter. And again, Paul is dealing with this issue of the weak and the strong when it comes to food laws and religious holidays, etc., just as he's dealt with previously in Romans as well as in the books of Corinthians. And because some followers of Christ were strong believers, Paul says. They were mature and understood that all food is okay to eat. Other believers were weak believers and thought, man, it's a sin to eat that. And Paul said, well, they're wrong. But he deals with that issue because the differences of opinion was causing division in the church, and both groups were at times judging each other, and it was hurting the faith of some of the believers. And so he deals with that issue again here. And here's some of the points that he makes that I want to share with you. One is that each person has to do in accordance with their own sincere convictions. In other words, if somebody really is spiritually weak and they think it's a sin to eat that, then they shouldn't eat it because it bothers them. Now, they should be able to grow beyond that, but as long as they're at that place, then they need to follow their conscience. If in your text in Romans 14, if you'll pick up with me at verse 5, okay, Romans 14, verse 5, he says, one person regards one day above another regards every day alike. So the weak says these days are more important. The strong, mature say, no, every day is a day God created. There's really no differences in them. Each person, here it is, each person must be fully convinced in his own mind. So you have to have your own conviction and do what is right in your own mind. The one in verse 6 who observes the day observes it for the Lord, and he who eats does so for the Lord, for he gives thanks to God, and so on. And so the idea is you need to have your own convictions, and you need to do everything out of sincerity. In verses 22 and 23, he says, the faith which you have as your own conviction before God. Happy is he who does not condemn himself in what he approves. In other words, if you think something is wrong and you do it, you're not going to be happy. So, live according to your own convictions. But he who doubts is condemned if he eats, because his eating is not from faith, and whatever is not from faith is sin. So again, he stresses that you need to be sincere in your convictions, and you need to live out of your own beliefs, your own convictions. He goes on to say that we should not judge each other, that the weak should not judge the strong, and the strong should not judge the weak. In verses 1 through 4, verse 10, verse 12, verses 13, he talks about all of that. So when the weak, or sometimes in our modern case, legalists in the church judge the strong, they tend to be, they tend to be very judgmental in that direction. And sometimes the strong, who recognize that there's not anything sinful about that, look down their nose and he said, just stop judging each other. Both of you are wrong when you judge each other. A third point he makes is that sometimes the strong have to sacrifice for the spiritual well-being of the weak. The latter part of verse 13 all the way through verse 17, he talks about that. And I'm not saying a lot about that today, because we've already said a lot about that in previous weeks from Romans and also in Corinthians, where we were just a few weeks ago. He says the priority, the thing that should drive us, is what he refers to as peace and edification. Let's look at verses 19 to 21. He said, so then, in view of all this stuff that's going on, he said, pursue the things which make for peace and the building up of one another, edification, the encouraging of one another. Do not tear down the work of God for the sake of food. Don't destroy the church over these issues. All things are, he says, all things indeed are clean, but they are evil for the man who eats and gives offense. In other words, If it bothers you, then it's wrong for you to do it. But the truth is, there's nothing wrong with any food. But don't tear the church up over this stuff. In verse 21, it is good not to eat meat or drink wine or do anything by which your brother stumbles. So pursue peace and unity and harmony and the building up of the church. Now, sometimes those who are weak, those who are legalist in churches, use the fact that the strong are supposed to consider the impact on the weak and therefore sacrifice. Use that like a sledgehammer. And instead of growing, the weak just keep judging the strong and demanding that the strong always give in to the viewpoint of the weak, even though the viewpoint of the weak is the wrong viewpoint. Paul is really saying that the strong, through their willingness to sacrifice at times, are trying to love the weak and help them grow. Well, the weak also need to be willing to grow and move beyond their immature understanding of truth, instead of using their legalistic mindset as a sledgehammer to beat up everybody who is actually more mature in the faith than they are. Think about it. The fact that Paul actually refers to them as weak says something. And it should say to those who are legalistic, you're weak spiritually, so you need to get stronger spiritually. And the way you get stronger spiritually is not using your weakness as a sledgehammer, but to grow beyond your weakness and to have a fuller, richer understanding of grace, of salvation, of righteousness, of holiness, of living for God out of the Spirit and not out of obeying the law, do's and don'ts, rules, all of that kind of stuff. So the problem comes when either the strong or the weak always insist on their way. So sometimes those who are stronger in the faith and have a better understanding of these issues need to give a little bit to help not offend the weak and to help them grow. But the weak have to be willing to grow. Because if you're always weak, wow, that means you're always immature in your faith in Jesus Christ. So the strong, be patient and kind, and sometimes give a little. The weak, don't judge. Grow up. That's God's word for the day. Look forward to being with you tomorrow as we look at Romans chapter 15. God bless you. Have a good evening.